couple of days ago, I was walking down the street and I saw this thing on my neighbor's front porch. And she said, yeah, if you want to make a video about it, go ahead and take it. And now that I have it down in my shop, I don't know what to say about it. Up close, lots of the details in this piece are amateurish. They're almost primitive. But then some other parts are skillfully executed. And overall, this thing's got shape, proportion. It's got the kind of unity of design that you don't get by accident. Overall, this is the most mysterious piece I've ever had in my shop. The weirdest details are the joinery, like on this front leg where these two aprons come together. Here, you would expect to find standard mortise and tenon joinery, but instead, this front apron comes across and is half-lapped into the end of the leg, and there's a big gap here, like a 1/4 inch of missing wood. It's really visible. Then the rear apron comes in and is bridle jointed into the top of the leg. This is a bizarre mishmash of joinery, and it's easy to think, okay, this was made by a home gamer, no shame in that. This is just somebody who didn't know how to cut a mortise and tenon. Except, let's go around back to the opposite corner. Back here, we've got a pair of neatly executed mortise and tenons. They come through both of these aprons and meet seamlessly in the leg. So this is a craftsperson who totally knew how to execute a mortise and tenon and just didn't. Well, they did back here, where nobody's ever going to see it. And the weird amateur hour joinery, well, that's in the front, on full display. And it gets even weirder if I take out this drawer. Over on this corner, we've got some sort of weird curved shape that's been inset into the end of the leg. And this is a continuous piece of wood. It comes all the way over to here, but apparently there was just a gap here because there's just a square of wood that's been nailed in place into the leg, turning this joint into a complete abomination. It doesn't make any sense at all. If we go to the left-hand side of the top, things get even weirder. There are these bizarre-shaped little cutouts. They almost look like dovetail sockets, but then there would be more of them, and they're the wrong shape anyway. Then these two boards that make up the top, well, they've been beveled on the side, and those bevels are put together to make this weird triangular gap, and that gap carries over to the top. The whole thing just looks weird, like somebody was just messing around at random. Except down here at the bottom, we've got a stretcher in between each set of legs, and there's a neat mortise and tenon joint at each end. Then these side stretchers are joined in the middle by a central stretcher that's been flipped horizontally, tenoned all the way through, and then joined with a tusk. This is a tusked mortise and tenon, which means the mortise here at the end of this little tenon, it's been cut at an angle, and then this angled key or tusk has been added in. I've cut this joint a few times for workbenches and stuff like that. It's not easy. Nobody does something like this if they're messing around randomly. Nobody does it by accident. You have to know what you're doing. Okay, let's zoom out just a little bit. We can date this piece to around 1920. It's got a lot of nails, and they're round wire nails instead of the square cut or forged nails you would have seen in an earlier piece. And we can say that it's from the 1920s because this is very clearly in the Craftsman style. Arts and crafts furniture was a movement that started in Great Britain, and then it came over to America, where the most famous designer was Gustav Stickley. He coined the term Craftsman furniture. Stickley is one of my favorite designers and not well remembered today, but he was a giant in his time, very influential. Now, the neighborhood where I live in Cleveland Heights, in fact, pretty much all the neighborhoods in Cleveland Heights are filled with Craftsman-inspired homes. They've got curves, big overhanging porches, protruding through tenons, all sorts of basic aesthetic details just like you would find in Craftsman-style furniture. And my house, the house I'm sitting in right here, this was built in 1920. So clearly, this piece was made right at the same time as all the rest of the houses around here with appropriate technology for the time. But that still leaves the question, why is it so weirdly constructed? Because every stick of wood in this piece is reused. It all used to be something else. If we look at the edge of the top and these recesses I pointed out before, well, something used to attach here. Something came in and sat in here and was either screwed in place or glued in place. That also explains these weird bevels in the middle. These must have been the top of something. Those are decorative details. My best theory here is that these were maybe drawer fronts, and so the sides were somehow attached here, and these bevels, they would have been the top of the drawer. So they would have looked nice or maybe even given you a place to hook your fingers. It's not a perfect theory, but it's a pretty good explanation for why these parts look the way they do. Once we understand that everything in this piece is reused wood, all sorts of design choices suddenly fall into focus. Back here, where we have the only good pair of mortise and tenon joints, well, we know why they're in the back now. There's a ton of damage to this piece. It's badly chipped away and there are big nail holes at the top. Now, the Craftsman, I'm sure, realized that this was the best joint they made in the whole thing, but it still had to be hidden because all this damage, this couldn't be visible in the front. And understanding all this reuse of materials, well, it makes all sorts of details make way more sense. Let's come back and look at this front corner again. This weird curved piece of joinery here, well, this is so weird because it's actually a piece of trim. This is a molding profile. And you can see in this crack right here, it's mitered. It goes in at a 45. So this was probably like a decorative skirt around the bottom of a dresser. It had a molding profile, and then this would have been the corner. The craftsperson inset this so that it could work as the front, carried it all the way over here, and then something must have been wrong with this piece of wood because this is just a filler block. This started out life as a piece of decorative trim and then became the front of our nightstand. Now, all that's very cool, but we've got to talk about this drawer. It's basically in the false front style, which means the drawer itself is an independent box and then the front is just attached after construction. When you do it this way, you get the outside to overhang and cover the sides of the drawer where you might see a gap, but you don't have to cut half-blind dovetails. So this is a very efficient, simple way of making a drawer that's still strong and looks good. And it really is simple. All the joints in this thing are just nailed together. Well, almost all of them. It's not easy to see, but this joint right here, this is actually finger jointed. The finger joint, you might have seen it on YouTube. It's a square joint. It kind of took over for the dovetail when machine furniture became common. And starting in the early 1900s, you see this on all sorts of things. You see it on drawers and in furniture. You see it in shipping crates. You even see it in like basic household consumables and containers for stuff you would have brought home, food and stuff like that. Wouldn't it be cool if that's where this drawer came from? Well, maybe it is. Let's flip it over. In a lot of ways, the bottom of this drawer is the key to understanding the whole piece. It's all in here. So there's some clear ripples in the wood where it obviously went through a machine planer early in its life. But there are also hand planing marks, especially over here, and lots of really conspicuous tear out. So when the home crafts person got their hands on it, they must have had to plane this to get it down to the right thickness to make a good drawer bottom. And then there's some weird marks around here. Well, this is all newsprint. At some point when it was getting repainted, somebody set it down while it was still wet on a newspaper. And I can tell that because all the writing here is flipped. It's a negative. So it must have peeled off. And a lot of the ink stayed right here. I think the best feature is there's some lettering. I thought it was newsprint at first, but it's not. It says right here, to be kept cool after, and I assume it would have said opening. So it said to be kept cool after opening. This was some sort of a food box. This was for fruit or maybe cheese, something like that. And then this corner here, this is the one that had the finger joint. The craftsperson kept this one corner and then remade all the other ones with nailed joinery. Whoever made this was a master at reusing things. Just this one joint was good and got kept, and then the whole rest of the drawer was built around that. And it's all just a hodgepodge of materials. This front here, well, this is actually early plywood. It's a lot better than the stuff we get now, but you can see it separating just a little bit there. This is the whole history of the piece in just this one little segment. I could look at it all day. Whenever I have an old piece of furniture like this, and I do furniture forensics, I want the piece to tell me a story. In this case, I think the story starts with Gustav Stickley. The father of Craftsman furniture sold his stuff in stores and in catalogs, but he even had his own magazine, The Craftsman, where you could find articles about his style and his architecture, and also pieces about how you could make it yourself. Gustav was sort of an early father of the DIY movement, and he wanted his furniture styles to be so accessible, he just flat out told people how to make them, and even gave away plans. Looking at this piece and looking at the very clear similarities between it and established Craftsman pieces, well, clearly, whoever saw this piece had to build it. And they didn't necessarily have the wood, so they found some wood and made it happen. And that really makes me wonder, okay, well, who was the person who made it? One story I think about is maybe this was a master craftsman, an old hand, but the wood choices make me think this person probably had fallen on hard times. Maybe somebody who was reduced to scavenging wood out of the trash, trying to copy the latest styles and maybe even sell it door to door. That's a grim story, but it's possible. Another story is that maybe this piece was made by a talented amateur, somebody just coming into their own, somebody just figuring out how to do tricky details like the tusk, mortise, and tenon. You know, maybe this is somebody who even read The Craftsman and got their start from those articles. It's possible, and that makes sense with the wood choices too. If you weren't a professional, if you were building it for yourself, well, you wouldn't care if some of the details maybe were a little bit off. It was just going to be in your house anyway. And I mean, I think we've all had that experience of finding some wood on the side of the road and thinking, oh, I could get a table out of this. I think. You know, I'm the research and reading guy. I'm always telling people, if you want to build furniture, you got to read about furniture. And that's true. Except you're not going to find a piece like this in most furniture books, because most of the people who write those books, they kind of edit the collection so that stuff like this isn't in it. They're not interested in weirdo, half-baked stuff like this. But in addition to reading, I also just go around and look at a lot of old furniture at antique fairs and antique shops and stuff by the side of the road, and I see a lot more weirdo stuff than standard fits-in-the-box kind of furniture. And, you know, you can find stuff like this, but you just have to go look for it. You have to look around where you live, and when you find something like this, you can't dismiss it. You have to realize that this kind of odd, unusual, reclaimed stuff, this is fully legitimate furniture. It looks cool. I liked it from 100 feet away and brought it home and made a video about it. It still works. The drawer slides in and out. The top is flat. This is a completely legitimate piece of furniture. And the stuff we build is totally legitimate too. We might not be professionals, but if you build a piece of furniture and somebody likes it and it works, then it's good. There's nothing else to say about it than that. And I think that's a really good reason to take pride in your work, and a good reason to do stuff like this, even if you don't think you can. Anyway, if you'd like to build something really similar to this, I've got a couple of videos on building this little shaker end table in a very traditional style. I've also got a set of plans that we recently redid in Fusion 360, so they're really clear and easy to understand. And last week, I built this little cricket stool. It is a limited tools build. You don't even need a standard workbench to put it together. You can get all of this stuff, including the cricket stool plans, which are free, over at rexkrueger.com/store, and also patreon.com/rexkrueger. Patrons get all my plans for free, and I wouldn't be doing this without them. So if you'd like to see more of these videos, go on over there and throw a couple dollars in the hat. Of course, I appreciate my viewers so much. Thanks for watching.